Starting us off at number 10 are genetically engineered slaves. Nowhere in the show do we ever find out where the Teletubbies come from, where they are, how they got there, absolutely nothing. The only thing we do know is that they aren't in control of their own destiny, they're controlled by 3 factors. The first is the voice, which is the maternal voice that blasts from the speakers below them and tells them when they should eat, when they should say goodbye, and when they should sleep. And since this voice is there in every episode, it's clear that something bigger than the show is monitoring the Teletubbies and what they're doing. The second factor controlling them is Nunu, the anthropomorphic vacuum cleaner that literally follows them around, cleaning up after them and then scolding them when they make bad decisions. That's what Nunu is on the surface, but really it's more of a watchdog and the tool used by whoever put the Teletubbies there to control them. The final thing is the mysterious godhead wind peel that the Teletubbies worship. Whenever it spins, the Teletubbies drop whatever they're doing and run to the hill and perform a ritual for the gods, trying to be the only one that's favored. The one that gets chosen has their genetically implanted TV screen activated and it's seen as a reward because they're the Teletubby that gets to deliver the message to the other ones. The screen itself shows an indoctrination video showing the world of man and how one day the Teletubbies are going to serve us. Now we come on to the sun baby. It's something the Teletubbies won't fear, they understand it and they like the baby, but really the baby is just hiding the totalitarian eyes that watch them from the outside. Either way, it's clear that the Teletubbies are cut off from outside influence and are being controlled and courted into becoming our slaves. Quite sad when you think about it that way.
Moving on to number 9, we have the deadly ending. This theory suggests that the happy ever after featured in the Muppet movie never actually happened. In fact, they believe that all the Muppets died at the end of the film. So let's look at the facts. In the ending scene, Gonzo crashes into the rainbow scenery. As a result, it comes crashing down. There's no way that the Muppets could have survived that. They would have been crushed by it. Then on top of that, an electrical failure causes a light to explode and blows a hole in the studio's roof. Again, it seems like they conveniently dodged death. Or did they? The explosion causes a rainbow to shine in through the hole in the roof. Then, all of a sudden, Kermit and others are joined by tons of other Muppets that weren't previously there. So they believe that in fact, the explosion caused all the Muppets to die. They are then greeted by their friends to help them into the light. If you notice, the Muppets that appear in the last scene are all the characters that haven't made an appearance in a long time. AKA, those characters are said to be the dead ones in the franchise. So, in fact, the Muppets died and they are met with their other dead friends who take them into the afterlife.
At number 8 we have The Home. So the show is filmed in this luscious Greenland area where the grass is never not green and the sun is always there. A utopia, if you will, but not anymore. Rosemary Harding, the owner of the land where the exterior shots were taken, got so fed up and angry with the amount of trespassers that would come to her house because they wanted to see where the show took place and whatnot, that she couldn't take it anymore. People used to jump her fences, cross the cattle fields, just have no respect for the area whatsoever. So she ended up flooding the whole thing and turning it into a giant pond so no one would bother her again. Bit savage, I'm not gonna lie. And I feel like that's just like an end of an era, like there's never gonna be Teletubbies shot there again. It's done, it's gone, it's a pond now. Filling a number 7 slot is the Harry Potter crossover. No, there was never a massive Harry Potter and Teletubbies crossover that you missed, but Emma Lord theorized that J.K. Rowling was inspired by watching the Teletubbies. So the show first aired in 1997 and 2 months later the first Harry Potter book came out. Now just imagine JK watching Harry Potter with her daughter, and yes, I know the first episode aired after she had completed the first draft, but her first drafts can always be changed. But it was actually Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows where the crossover came to fruition. According to Emma, Lala was the best Teletubby, so Harry Potter is Lala. Then comes Tinky Winky as the invisibility cloak because apparently no one cared about Tinky Winky, which in Tinky Winky's defense is very harsh. Someone had to be the oldest of the group, we can't hate him for it. Anyway, next comes Dipsy as the elder one because Dipsy was always screwing things up at home and is the most stubborn one of the group, and let's face it, the elder one was pretty problematic. Last but not least comes cute little Po as a resurrection stone. Despite her being the youngest of the group, she clearly had the hunger to live forever. And there you have it guys, the crossover is complete. Utterly ridiculous, I know, but perhaps plausible. Now at number 6 is Tubby Custard. Honestly, I used to love watching them eat Tubby Custard or throw it around. It looked so good, I just wanted to devour it. Or maybe because I'm fasting right now, I'm finding it very appetizing when it really wasn't. But anyway, Redditor Poob, spelt with a Q, has quite an interesting theory about what Tubby Custard even is. It doesn't have the same color or texture as custard, so clearly it isn't proper custard. It looks sort of like liquefied chewing gum, so the user theorized the Hoover chews many packets of gum all at once and then separates them into 4 even molds while the Teletubbies are outside. If that doesn't tickle your fancy, the user came up with another theory. He went on to discuss a theory about how sometimes the government uses cartoons to promote unhealthy eating practices, so what if Tubby Custard was the pink fake meat from McDonald's? The meat there is just random bits of chicken blended together becoming pink from leftover blood. And the kids watching the show obviously wouldn't know the difference, so it would subliminally promote the message of eating things like that. Coming in at number 5 is the demon face. So I'm sure everyone watching the video has watched the show, but if you haven't, the baby sun appears in every episode and it rises during the intro. We've all seen it, there's nothing new there. But one user decided to watch it late at night one day just because he was bored, which I mean fair enough, we all love a bit of nostalgia. But he realized about 20 seconds in, right before the baby sun disappears, it morphed into a demonic form or shape. And it wasn't that, oh, while the screen was stretching out, the sun just started looking strange. No, it morphed into something and then stretched and disappeared. Thinking maybe it was just late and he was tired and saw something that wasn't there, he decided to watch another video to confirm. And it was there again. He watched another one and it was there again as well. And now I'm like, what's up with that? Why does a children's show have subliminal images of horror inside of it that's being fed to young children via Teletubbies? The user went on to digest the episode even more and realized most of the episodes have an endlessly spinning windmill that he reckons mirrors hypnotic imagery. Children's minds really aren't as developed as ours, and so it's easy for their minds to get manipulated watching something rather than ours. Maybe your child doesn't just love the Teletubbies and wants to watch it every day, maybe they were subliminally hypnotized into liking it. What say you? At number 4 is Seesaw. So funnily enough, an episode titled Seesaw ended up getting banned from being aired because of parents and kids complaining about how creepy and scary it was. The episode features the lion and the bear. The scary lion has big scary teeth, and both animals were made out of wood and traveled around on skateboard looking things rather than being animated. The episode gained a lot of controversy because the animals looked too uncanny. They had weird eyes, weird ears, they moved on their own, they spoke in scary voices, and ultimately they were just too much for the audience. At the end of the episode, there's even a chase sequence, and it traumatized some kids so much that they started suffering from anxiety. It's kind of like us watching a chase sequence in Planet Earth when we're really just rooting for the prey, except it was kids watching a lion chase a bear. And I can see how that could have been scary, but also they were wooden, for God's sake. How scary could it have really been? Filling our number 3 slot is The Comeback. So this article by the Sydney Morning Herald was published in 2014, and it was about the show's comeback. It's not surprising a comeback happened because the show was iconic back in the day and everyone liked it, but it did end in 2001 and TV has changed dramatically since then. The producer of DHX Media, Stephen Denyor, said the show depicts them interacting with technology in an indirect way. I mean, they have TVs on their bellies, their best friend is a vacuum cleaner, etc. But many claim the show encourages kids to play with technology more instead of going outside and playing. A US televangelist back in the day even said Tinky Winky was a concealed gay role model because he carried a handbag that was encouraging homosexuality amongst young kids who didn't even know what it was yet. Leave the man's handbag alone, what's wrong with the handbag? It was fashion forward. Good going, Tinky Winky. Anyway, critics also said the show's dialogue is mostly sing-song and is barely verbal communication, which is damaging to an audience that's still learning how to speak. So there was a very nasty fight between TV consultants arguing against the show's comeback as unnecessary and damaging to the youth. Now at number 2 are the Tiddlytubbies. So if you don't know, there's actually a Teletubbies spin-off series that started airing in 2015 and it's called Tiddlytubbies. And yes, the Tiddlytubbies are the kids of the original 4. There are 8 Tiddlytubbies living in the home dome with the original 4, and their names are Bar, Ping, Mimi, Umbi Pumbi, Dada, Nin, and Duggledy. They all have their own colors, and quite honestly, they're actually really cute. But when people found this out, they were shook. First of all, most audience members thought all 4 Teletubbies were guys. Second of all, they didn't even know they could have intercourse. I mean, how do they even do it? Who did it with who? You can kind of guess by the colors of the Tiddlytubbies. One of them is orange, so I'm guessing that was Poe and Lala's doing, even though they're both girls, so like how? I don't think adoption is a thing where they live, so people have actually theorized they have intercourse from the appendages on their head. I have no idea which goes in what and what the process is, but I'm willing to go with it. And finally, at number 1 is the backstory. Scarlet Siren claims she found out the backstory of the show and it's horrific, long, but it's worth it. The show was based on a mental institute in Bulgaria nicknamed La La Land. The children inside were treated horribly. They were abused, locked in cold dark rooms, carers would forget to feed them. It was bad. And each Teletubby was based on a group of kids that all died on the same day. First was a girl called Lala. She had a facial deformity that stretched her face so it looked like she was permanently smiling. She was locked away and isolated for 5 years, so her mind had just basically gone. She would dance in her room with no music, would mutter gibberish because she couldn't speak a word of Bulgarian, and she turned quite yellow because of zero exposure to the sun. Yet she was always smiling, even when abused, even when her legs broke and she couldn't dance, all the time. And this of course was the inspiration behind Lala. Another kid called Towote was 7 at the time and would spend all his time rocking back and forth and speaking gibberish as well. He was deaf and he also had a similar facial deformity as Lala, which meant he too was smiling all the time. He was the most stubborn of the lot. He used to hit his head against the wall until the stone chipped off, so the carers used to tie him to the fences outside. They left him there so frequently and for so long he'd get frostbite often and his limbs turned bluish from the ice. This was the inspiration behind Tinky Winky. Next comes a 6-year-old boy named Donka. He couldn't speak because no one ever taught him to, and he was sick all the time. Half his life he was starved because he'd throw up anything he ever ate. He was so weak he couldn't even walk, so he spent days just lying in his own vomit, too sick and weak to move away. No one knew what was wrong with him and the carers never called a doctor to find out. Donka was the inspiration behind Dipsy. Last was a 3-year-old girl called Polina who spent her whole life at the institute. She had the same deformity as the first two, so she always smiled as well, which horrified her parents, and that's why they sent her there. One night she fell asleep near the logs for a fire and the carers threw her into it, not realizing she wasn't a log. Her skin was melting, her flesh was burning, she was screaming, and the carers got her out, but it was far too late. Her skin was burnt a raw red color and never recovered, yet she still smiled. And that was the inspiration behind Po. You may be thinking this is so tragic, how do these kids even live day-to-day life? But the only thing that made them happy were the TVs that showed them happiness and a life outside the institute. One day they realized the carers wanted to get rid of the TVs because they were far too expensive, so all 4 formulated a plan to hide them before they could. That night when the carers weren't there, they took the tiny TVs but realized they had nowhere to hide them. They decided to swallow them like they had swallowed many of their toys to hide them from the carers. The next morning the carers came into their room heaving from the heavy stench of blood. The 4 kids had clawed out their own stomachs and the blood-stained TVs were there in the middle. Their organs were spilling out, flies were all over them, yet they were smiling.
Starting off at number 10, we have the hallucination. So when the show began, the character Snuffleupagus was a figment of Big Bird's imagination. Snuffleupagus, or Snuffy, is a weird mammoth-looking creature covered in shaggy brown hair. Now, only Big Bird was able to see Snuffy, and people classified him as having schizophrenia. But then, eventually, other characters on the show began to see him too. Well, people believe that all the members in this town are experiencing a mass hallucination. It's some sort of weird plague that just has spread around the town and now everyone is delusional and can see Snuffy. Poor Snuffy, I bet he just wants some friends. But honestly, the old version of Snuffy looks terrifying. I think he's supposed to be a mammoth, but he definitely doesn't look like one.
Coming in at number 9 is their height. Now on the show, the Teletubbies look like cute pint-sized creatures who you low-key just want to cuddle, but it turns out they're not little at all, they're gigantic. The whole group ranges from being 6'7" to 7'11" in real life. They'd be gargantuan in real life, bigger than Barney, and Barney was massive, and even bigger than Big Bird. Tinky Winky is 7'11", Dipsy and Lala are both 7 foot, and Po is 6'7", which makes the whole show just a lot more sinister because they went from miniature cute creatures to ones that tower over you and pummel you if they wanted to. Their costumes weigh more than 30 pounds, and there's actually a danger of carbon dioxide buildup in the suit if performers have them on for too long. So, moral of the story, the Teletubbies are sinister, massive giants that could very well kill you. And after now knowing how big they were, then you may also want to know that the rabbits in Teletubbyland were also bloody massive to try and look like normal sized rabbits next to the Teletubbies. The end. Enjoy your day.
In our 8th spot, we have the Count. Now, the Count is far from the Twilight heartthrob vampires. He's this creepy purple puppet that is constantly teaching children how to count. Why does he do that? Well, people believe that he tricks these kids into playing his counting game, and then afterwards he feasts on them. This is why we're constantly seeing new kids in each episode. Each kid falls for the same trap.
They play with the Count thinking that he's friendly and funny, the next thing you know, they're his dinner. But the Count only likes to target young children. Why is that? Well, it's because kids are easier to fool. To ensure that he is not stopped, he put a spell on all the adults. That way they can't save the kids. Moving on, at number 7 we have the entrance to Sesame Street. So this next theory states that Sesame Street is a real place that children can go. However, there's just one catch. Once you find the opening, you can no longer escape. So they say that the clue to finding Sesame Street is all in the opening theme song. So if you listen to the song lyrics, it starts with sunny days. So in order to get there, it has to be sunny outside. Then the song says, while sweeping the clouds away. People think this means you have to carry a broom as identification to get in. Like, seriously, a broom? Continuing on, the song says, come and play. People think this means you need to be at a nearby playground. And then you have to say out loud, can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? Oscar will appear in a nearby trash can and you have to give him the secret password, which is everything's A-okay. Now, this seems all too elaborate, but if any of you try it and meet Big Bird, then let me know. Although, that may be hard because as soon as you enter, you can't exit. Coming up next at number 6, Sesame Street is based on a true story. What? How are these puppet creatures based on a true story? Well, let me explain. So each character in Sesame Street is said to be a person in real life. Oscar the Grouch is a homeless man. Bert and Ernie are typical roommates struggling to pay rent and get by. Cookie Monster is a drug addict that constantly needs his fix. And lastly, Elmo is an orphan who only has a goldfish and crayons as his belongings. We are now at our halfway mark with Oscar the Hoarder. Now, it's quite unusual that Oscar the Grouch lives in a trash can. Well, turns out that he is a compulsive hoarder. This theory believes that Oscar once started off as just someone who would rummage through garbage and keep what he found. He would do this constantly and the amount of stuff in his apartment became overwhelming. He also never wanted to leave his home. He had a lot of financial issues from not being able to work and ended up being kicked out of his home. The only other place out there for him that gave him comfort was the garbage can, so that's where he decided to live. It's also a place for him to get more trash since people will throw it right to him. Now, fun fact, Oscar was originally orange. Hard to believe it, but he was. So people theorize that he's still orange, but the color is hidden by layers of slime and dirt from him not washing. Coming in at number 4, we have Demon Elmo. Now, Elmo can be fairly annoying. His high-pitched voice and laugh can definitely get on people's nerves. Well, what if that's the point? People theorize that this creature is a demon. First off, he is red, the color associated with the devil, and secondly, he is targeted towards children. So he befriends young children, makes them feel safe, and then he harms and tortures them. Just like the thing with Mr. Noodle. He literally has trapped Mr. Noodle in a hell-like prison, making Elmo the devil. He tortures Mr. Noodle and other individuals constantly. The whole happy and child-friendly behavior is all just a persona. He actually has a much darker agenda. In our third spot, we have the drug problem. Now, people say that Sesame Street was once a really run-down and drug-infested area. The streets were dirty and tons of people had terrible drug addictions. Eventually, the streets were cleaned up. However, Oscar the Grouch was never able to move on from this. Oscar is said to be a huge drug addict. He lives in the garbage can with hopes that someone will discard a needle or anything that he can use to get his fix. Oscar was forced to just go cold turkey when the streets were cleaned up. That is why he may appear to have an attitude problem. It's because he is currently suffering through withdrawal. Man, I feel so bad for poor old Oscar. He literally can't catch a break out here. At number 2, we have Elmo's regressive behavior. Basically, this theory surrounds the fact that Elmo is stuck in a state of regression. So, Freudian psychology refers to regression as going back to an earlier stage in life. People think that this is why Elmo is stuck acting and behaving like a child. They believe that Elmo is actually older, yet he is stuck in this child mindset as it's a safe space for him. He is seen whining, using baby talk, and doing childlike activities. To support this theory, Elmo is constantly asking Mr. Noodle to show him how to complete a task like washing his hands. Elmo should be able to do that independently by now. Then he also always points out his crayons and his fish. Those are his comfort items that help him stay connected to this child state. Now, this theory also believes that Elmo is currently seeking treatment for it. In fact, Mr. Noodle is his doctor. Every time he opens the window, he sees Mr. Noodle. And, well, that's because Mr. Noodles is outside of Elmo's room monitoring his behavior. But for now, seems like Elmo is trapped in this state. And in our number 1 spot, we have the fact that Sesame Street is a psychiatric facility. Now, this is the most popular theory out there for many reasons. People are convinced that each character in Sesame Street are actually patients of a facility called Sesame Street. So let's break down some of the characters and what they're diagnosed with. Telly the monster is said to have an anxiety disorder. Telly is constantly worrying and can't focus on the task at hand. Then you have Count, who is said to have OCD. This would explain why he is continuously counting. In fact, his OCD is so severe that it prevents him from doing everyday tasks like answering the phone. In one episode, Count refuses to answer the phone because he wanted to count the rings. That shows how strong his impulses are. His OCD even prevents him from having a job. In the episode where Count gets a job as an elevator operator, he refused to stop at any floor but the 10th. That's because he felt the impulse to always count to 10. This is also why we see him locked away in his castle. He can't function in the outside world. Moving on, people believe that Cookie Monster suffers from an eating disorder. Throughout the show, you can see that Cookie Monster turns to binge eating as one of his coping strategies. And then lastly, you have Oscar the Grouch that suffers from oppositional defiant disorder. Now, argumentative and vindictive behavior and irritability are all considered part of this disorder. That literally perfectly summarizes up Oscar. There are so many other characters that are said to suffer from other disorders to prove this theory.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Muppet system. Someone out there created a theory that all humans can be classified using a Muppet system. They believe that we are either Chaos Muppets or Order Muppets. Chaos Muppets are emotional, out of control, and more aggressive, whereas the Order Muppets are neurotic, organized, and controlled. From there, it's said that if we understand what Muppet class that we identify with, then we can better understand each other. It also states that Chaos and Order Muppets tend to date and marry each other. For example, Miss Piggy is said to be a Chaos Muppet, whereas Kermit is an Order Muppet, making them the perfect pair. So what do you identify as? Are you a Chaos or Order Muppet? I think I'm definitely an Order Muppet, but let me know in the comments below.
Moving on, at number 9 we have Mr. Noodle, and I don't mean like the packages of ramen noodles. So Mr. Noodle is shown to live outside a window at Elmo's house. Now, why does he live there? Like seriously, out of all the places, he's living in some weird realm close to headache-inducing Elmo. Well, turns out that Mr. Noodle is trapped in a version of hell. Elmo then forces him to do whatever he says or else he'll face the consequences. But no matter what, Mr. Noodle will never escape and he will spend eternity being tortured by Elmo. Mr. Noodle is not allowed to talk either. He just has to nod, wave, and do as he's told. Elmo makes him do things like dance and do tasks for his own personal entertainment. The tasks always end up with Mr. Noodle completely embarrassing himself, but Elmo loves it. Poor Mr. Noodle, he's stuck listening to Elmo's squeaky voice for eternity.
In our 8th spot, we have the screening room. So let's stay on the Muppets movie for just another second. There are numerous scenes where the Muppet characters seem to conveniently dodge death. Well, this theory states that they did die and were taken to a place called the screening room. From there, they watch a movie on how their life would have gone if they did survive. Basically, it's a way for them to rewrite their own ending, giving themselves a happier outcome. And that's what we as the audience are watching. Moving on to number 7, we have the Muppet World. So it's kind of weird how the Muppets live alongside humans without them even questioning it. It seems like humans accept them as if they're just a normal part of society. Well, this is when the next theory comes into play. The theory states that the Muppets come from another world that directly parallels Earth. But this world has a much longer rotation around the sun, which is why the Muppets are never shown to age. In this world, humans and Muppets live in harmony. They just both exist at the same time and it's completely normal. In our 6th spot, we have the Muppets' origin. So this is a theory on how the Muppets came to be. One Reddit user posted saying that the Muppets were created as a result of an experiment gone wrong. So they think that years ago, Gonzo came to Earth from space, since in the movie Muppets in Space, we find out that Gonzo is indeed an alien. Anyways, he abandons his alien planet and comes down to Earth. From there, he falls in love with a chicken named Camilla. But he knew it would be wrong for him to love a chicken, since he's an alien. So as a result, he called down 2 other aliens from his planet, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Dr. Beaker. From there, they made a machine that would turn Camilla more like his species. but the experiment went wrong, and as a result, it didn't just mutate Camilla, but it mutated thousands of others in the vicinity. For example, a frog mutated into Kermit the Frog, and a pig mutated into Miss Piggy, so on and so on. So from there, the Muppets were born. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Human-Muppets. Okay, so am I the only one that finds it weird how there are just a couple of Muppets that are clearly humans? These are the Swedish Chef and of course Statler and Waldorf. They don't really seem to fit into the Muppets world since all the other Muppets are like animals or monsters or creatures. Well, there's a theory out there that these individuals purposely had their souls placed into a Muppet so that they could live for eternity. Statler and Waldorf were 2 senior humans that just didn't want to die. So they had someone create a puppet that looked like them and then they put their souls into the puppet. Now let's take a look at the Swedish Chef. He is kind of super weird. Like, he looks like a human puppet and then all of a sudden he just has real human hands? Well, being that he's a chef, he didn't want to lose his cooking abilities. So he traded his ability to talk in order to keep his human hands, so he can still cook with no problems. In our 4th spot, we got Gonzo the Psycho. So Gonzo is clearly in love with Camilla the chicken. But there's something that's problematic with this. Not just the fact that she's a chicken, but something else. He is shown at times to chase after other chickens that aren't Camilla. He's just not sure which one she is. Hello? If you're in love with someone, wouldn't you be able to tell them apart from others? But nope. This theory states that Gonzo just has a general love and obsession with chickens. He captures chickens and holds them captive. If that chicken dies, then he just grabs another. No matter what chicken he is with, he will always call them Camilla. Coming in at number 3, we have Muppetism. This theory was created by the Reddit user Dude with the Face. Theory goes that Muppetism is a term used when humans give birth to Muppets. Yeah, that's right, you heard me. They believe that Muppets were created by humans. So, theory states that Muppets are born when they suffer from a genetic mutation. Muppetism is said to be passed genetically through families. This is demonstrated in the Muppets movie. In the film, Gary is a human and his brother Walter is a Muppet. In the movie, as they started to grow up, Gary noticed that he would grow, but his brother wouldn't. But they both have human parents, meaning that the humans gave birth to Walter, who suffers from Muppetism. In our 2nd spot, we have the Puppet Syndrome. This next theory states that the Muppets aren't real, but are controlled by people that suffer from Puppet Syndrome. Basically, this means that they don't identify as humans. Instead, they are 100% convinced that they are a puppet. As a result, they live vicariously through the puppet they are controlling. Which, I mean, this is kind of a real thing. There are some kids out there that are too shy to speak on their own, so they use puppets to speak on behalf of them. But in this case, they never detach themselves from the puppet. They are the puppet. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Lost Episode. Theory goes that there is a lost episode of the Muppets somewhere out there. Story goes that a young bellhop working for the Books Hotel ran into a guest carrying a VHS. The VHS read, "The Muppet Show Lost Episode." Being curious, he snuck into the man's room and stole the tape. But little did he know the horrors that would await him on this tape. This episode was apparently a Halloween special. He claims that the episode starts off with Kermit screaming at the audience. From there, Miss Piggy yells, "I'll show you how to make a Halloween special." She then grabs a propane tank and shoves the valve in Kermit's mouth. The Swedish Chef also makes an appearance where he cuts open Camilla the chicken and realistic guts and gore are splattered everywhere. The episode ends with Kermit the Frog taking his own life. Yikes, that sounds like a terrifying episode.